Americans aren't optimistic about Social Security. In fact, 72% think that Social Security will run out in their lifetimes. 23% think that they won't see any money at all ever, and that number jumps to almost 50% for Gen Z. And that's not surprising, considering that about a year ago, reports came out saying that Social Security would be insolvent by 2035 unless we did something about it. And in response, nobody did anything at all. And not only did nobody do anything, but the situation has actually gotten actively worse. Time magazine starts us off today. Social Security and Medicare are expected to need to cut monthly benefits in less than a decade, as the trust funds for both programs are on track to run dry earlier than previously predicted. A report on Wednesday from the Social Security and Medicare Board of Trustees pushed up the program's go-broke dates, meaning the point at which they will not have enough money to fully cover benefits. The worsening projections are in part because of a new law impacting Social Security and increasing healthcare costs, according to the report. And we will get to this new law and what it is and why it impacts stuff, but this is not the only report that's come out recently about Social Security. Actually, another one came out just yesterday suggesting that immigration, or the current lack thereof, could actually make it even earlier than these reports are predicting. But before we get to that, let's cover this report. How long will Social Security stay solvent? Meaning, how long will it be able to pay out 100% of the benefits? The go-broke date for Social Security's trust funds was pushed up to 2034 from last year's estimate of 2035. The funds cover old age and disability recipients. The program covers more than 60 million people in the United States. And to have lost 1 year in 1 year is absolutely terrible. This also means that if it gets pushed up anymore, then we have exactly one presidential election to find someone who is competent enough to fix this. To be clear, we've known that Social Security was unsustainable for a long time, at least in its current state, without some major overhauls to how it works or how people pay into it. But this can has just been kicked down the road for so long. Everyone has ignored it, and now it's here, and it has to be dealt with by either Trump or the next president. There is nobody afterwards that will have time to deal with this. But it's not just Social Security. It's actually even worse for Medicare. You can see, what about Medicare? Last year's report set the go-broke date for Medicare's Hospital Insurance Trust Fund at 2036. But the latest report pushed that date up to 2033. So in 1 year, we've lost 3 years, even worse than Social Security. Medicare is a federal health insurance program that offers coverage for people 65 and older, as well as people with certain disabilities. More than 68 million people in the US are enrolled in the program. The Hospital Insurance Trust Fund pays for Medicare Part A, which covers care provided in hospitals and skilled nursing facilities, as well as some in-home care. It also pays for hospice care. And 2033 is actually really soon. This is definitely going to have to be handled by the next president, because Trump's term is out in 2029, and then that's it. 2029 to 2033 is the next presidential cycle. And you can imagine that this will probably impact the election, because old people vote disproportionately far more and in far greater percentages than young people do. So if a campaign promise is that the president is going to fix this system somehow so that people don't go broke and elderly people aren't destitute and unable to pay for medical bills, you can imagine that's 68 million potential votes from elderly people who don't want to lose their health insurance or don't want to lose their homes because they're unable to pay for anything because they don't have Social Security. And in the United States, if you're not employed, then you don't have health insurance, which means when you retire, you automatically don't have health insurance. That's what this Medicare was for. It is a terrible system to suggest that no old or retired person should have health insurance, because anyone after the age of 65 would kind of just have to hope they had money, or they would just die. Now, I said we'd talk about the law that is causing the dates to move up, and here's what it is. Why have the go-broke dates moved up? The report largely attributes the Social Security go-broke date to being pushed up by a new law, the Social Security Fairness Act, which took effect in January. The law repealed the windfall elimination and the government pension offset provisions of the Social Security Act, which, quote, increased projected Social Security benefit levels for some worker, and affected the go-broke date for the Social Security Trust Fund, according to the report. Last year's expenses for Medicare's Hospital Insurance Fund were also greater than initially anticipated, according to the report, which contributed to the go-broke date for the program being pushed up. And the two laws they talk about, the windfall elimination and the government pension offset, are pretty complicated. But the idea of the law is to address the problem that people, when they work in public sectors or for the state or federal governments, often don't pay into Social Security, rather they pay into a pension. This law means that they're not eligible to draw Social Security at the levels that other people are because they did not pay into Social Security Security at the levels that other people did. Rather, they paid into a pension, and so instead of Social Security, they're drawing on that pension. However, it is not that black and white. The criticisms of the law say that it goes too far to penalize people that are drawing on these public pensions, especially since the people who have the pensions and aren't getting Social Security are very much disproportionately workers like firefighters and teachers. People that already have really low paying, really high demand jobs that are extremely important. Because after all, who wants to be a teacher if in addition to already very low pay, you also are giving up any Social Security benefits you might get in retirement? Now, to be clear, that is absolutely overly simplified, and if this is something that interests you, please look into it more and talk to people who are more knowledgeable than I am. But that is the general gist of the law. People who paid into public pensions don't get to draw as much on Social Security, and Biden saw that as an issue, and so he issued a new law that repealed that old law, meaning everybody gets to draw equally on Social Security no matter how much you paid into it. Not surprisingly, this causes it to run out faster because more money is being paid out. So we know what's happening. Social Security is going insolvent. And we know why it's happening, because there's not enough money coming in to cover all of the benefits. So the question becomes, well, what happens if we actually go insolvent? Thankfully, the article addresses this. What happens after the go broke dates? The funds hitting their go broke dates doesn't mean that there won't be any funds to cover any benefits after that point. After 2034, Social Security would only have enough funds to cover 81% of benefits. After 2033, Medicare's Hospital Insurance Trust Fund would only be able to pay 89% of the cost. So if this does happen, then people would get less money from Social Security and have to pay more money in hospital bills, which would essentially burn the candle at both ends of the stick, as it were, because you have less money coming in and more money going out. And unfortunately, I do have to be the bearer of bad news here and say that it actually gets worse than that. There's more to this that will probably cause Social Security to deplete even earlier than is currently anticipated. But before we talk about that, if you like business and finance news and updates like this one, I post 2 or 3 times a week, and I'd love a subscription. The report that I'm talking about is covered by Fox News. The Penn-Wharton budget model estimates that unauthorized immigrants paid about $24 billion in Social Security taxes in 2024, even though they're unable to receive benefits since they haven't yet obtained legal status. PWBM analyzed the impact of 3 deportation scenarios, taking into account levels of deportations and timelines for historical baseline levels of immigrations and deportations to return or not, and found that each would move up the depletion date for Social Security's trust fund by about half a year. Now, that's all a bit complicated, but basically what this is saying is that illegal immigrants disproportionately impact Social Security positively because they pay into it as long as they're getting a paycheck and that's being taxed, but they're not drawing any money from it because they don't have Social Security numbers. However, with Donald Trump's big illegal immigrant deportation efforts, what we're seeing is that those people who are paying into Social Security only and never drawing from it are actually being deported, meaning that we're probably going to see even less money in Social Security and coming into the Social Security fund than the previous report actually anticipated. Now, this says that the PWBM analyzed 3 deportation scenarios. The scenarios are a bit convoluted, but the first one basically says that 10% of unauthorized immigrants would be deported every year for Trump's 4 years, and then after that, it goes back to the baseline. The second scenario says that illegal immigration is reduced by 10% over the next 10 years instead of just 4 years that Trump is in office, and then it goes back to the baseline. And the third scenario is pretty extreme and says that all illegal immigrants in the United States are deported in the next 10 years with no future illegal immigration ever happening again. And each of those scenarios had pretty negative outcomes. The first one had $218 billion lost over the next 30 years. The next one had $656 billion lost over the next 30 years. And the last one had $884 billion lost over the next 30 years. And here's a quote from it. Replacing the lost revenue from permanent deportation would require increasing payroll taxes or some other equivalent to collect an additional $180 per year from the median household income in 2025, growing at around 3.5% each year in the future. Now, obviously, none of these specific scenarios would actually happen, but the point is that immigration, even illegal immigration, is absolutely vital for Social Security, because if you're being paid and you're in the US, then most likely you're being taxed, with at least some of that money going towards Social Security. But you don't have to just take Fox's word for it if you don't think they're a reputable website. CNN talks about this too. You can see it here. Undocumented immigrants contribute more to Social Security than they receive in benefits. President Donald Trump's drive to deport immigrants and block new arrivals could chip away at Social Security's finances at a time when the program is already on shaky financial footing, experts say. In addition to immigration and customs enforcement, so that's ICE, push for more removals, the Trump administration is also trying to convince certain immigrants to self-deport. The efforts included entering more than 6,000 immigrants' names into the Social Security Administration's database used to track dead people, which effectively cuts them off from being able to work, access financial services, and receive public health benefits. The move targets those who may have entered under programs that have since ended, such as the Biden administration's temporary work initiatives. These actions, however, could cut off a funding stream for Social Security. Now, if Fox and CNN are are agreeing on something as complicated as immigration being important for the United States, then you know it's probably worth paying attention to, especially if Fox is running articles about a conservative think tank actively supporting immigration because of how important it is. You can read that right here in the same article that we were talking about just a second ago. The conservative advocacy group Unleashed Prosperity released a report that emphasized the importance of legal immigration to the United States over the next several decades due to demographic challenges. The report noted that the Trump administration set a goal of 3% or higher GDP for the next decade, so that's 3% growth, a goal that would prove challenging without increased legal immigration. Now, the US simply does not have enough workers paying into Social Security for it to last much longer. We're also not having enough children either who will grow up to work. We are basically have more old people than we do young people, meaning there are more people drawing from Social Security than are actually paying into Social Security. And both CNN and Fox are arguing here that immigration is a really good solution for that. Now, this is a big and complicated issue. I'm not pretending like I have been able to solve it here in my office, but there are two other main solutions that people talk about when discussing this. The first one is to eliminate the cap on Social Security taxes. Currently, only the first $176,100 is actually taxed for Social Security. Everything after that is untaxed, with the idea being that because there's a limit to how much you can draw, there should also be a limit to how much you can pay in. Whereas if you were to remove that limit, you would have way more money coming into Social Security, which would kind of kick the can down the road a little bit, but maybe it would give you more time to figure out a better solution. The second option is really unpopular, and it's to raise the retirement age. If you retire later, then you're spending fewer years drawing on Social Security, meaning the money will last longer. That one is, I think, far less likely to happen, but the reality is if we don't do something, it's going to get even worse, and politicians absolutely love ignoring difficult problems like this. But the issue is we are actually measurably running out of time this time. Thanks for watching.